I'm the Angry Spork, and welcome to the second season of Taking Issue.
Other internet critics tend to have entire theme months, mostly about holidays or, in other cases, a theme related to what it is they review. Given the format of my show, I haven't got that kind of scheduling down. But what about upping the ante? Instead of a theme month, how about a theme year? Thus, I hereby declare this the year of the crossover.
I begin taking issue with the Marvel Knights miniseries Daredevil, Spider-Man, Unusual Suspects, written by Paul Jenkins with art by Phil Winslett, Tom Palmer, and Matt Milla with Avalon Studios. A brewing conflict in Manhattan's underworld draws the man without fear with the webhead without luck. Let's open up issue number 1 and see if this comic makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads.
The cover is by famed painter Alex Ross, featuring our two heroes, one facing the camera and the other twisting to face the same direction. Did someone startle him or something? We start off with a man named Kenny Fitzgerald, frantically running and crashing into an alley, begging to be left alone and pleading innocence. Even though it looks like he's running away from someone, we see Spidey lounging on a large web, apparently having taken a lead on the chase that started before the comic did. Spidey says he knows something's up with Kenny, given how speedy he gets in the presence of do-gooders. Fitzgerald claims he only runs information nowadays and even turned down someone's recent offer, so the wall crawler asks him to clarify while stringing him upside down by a decorative bracket.
Call this nitpicking if you must, but if Spider-Man's webs are sticky enough to entrap people, then why is he able to do this pulley maneuver? Shouldn't hoisting up the stoolie be offering some resistance, if not just straight up having the web stick to the bracket and not really moving much at all?
Fitzy says he isn't gonna talk, but Spidey lists off what he likes about the guy. He's far from a criminal genius, he's got a big mouth, and he's afraid of heights. We then cut to Daredevil traversing the city, narrating that he feels like someone thrashing in a scummy ocean while sharks watch and bide their time. I may be blind, but that doesn't mean I don't know how to feel.
What? You mean Stevie Wonder feels it when I chuck mustard-filled water balloons at him? Thanks for telling me now.
This is also the credits page, and a funny thing I noticed is how the people are credited with mechanical terms like droid and robot. Weird, since mechanics have nothing to do with what's going on in the book. Maybe it's a gag commentary on how effective they are. Anywho, on a 2-page spread that includes his acrobatics, Dee introduces himself and briefly delves into his origins and enhanced senses. He then exposits on recent criminal events, a deal at the docks that ended with 12 dead mobsters, and a third party making off with merchandise belonging to a certain Mr. Wilson Fisk. An illegal casino gets attacked, which sat below a restaurant frequented by a certain Mr. Wilson Fisk. Okay, weird to say it again, but moving on. And then closes saying a pricey but uninsured warehouse went all explodey, having the same MO.
You know, at this point, I think you can just say it was owned by Fisk. It doesn't seem like you're achieving the kind of whimsy you seem to be going for in the dialogue here. It just feels weird.
He arrives at home, unmasks, and heads downstairs so distracted by the strange events that he almost misses the various signs telling him he's not alone. But he already knows who it is and is totally casual about the maskless wall crawler underneath his stairs. After opening with a lawyer joke, Spidey figures Dee knows about the incidents at the docks, someone taking half a ton of drugs and the money to pay for it, leaving many to assume the mystery man didn't know they belonged to a certain criminal VIP.
Seriously, what is with this running bit? Just say Kingpin. Get to the point. Maybe it's supposed to have some subtle, deeper meaning or something, but it just comes off as redundant, and needlessly so.
Anyway, Peter suggests that whoever took the drugs and the money knew exactly who they were stealing from. The aforementioned warehouse that was torched seemed legit, except for something that was left out of the police reports. However, Spider-Man knows that. It's owned by Manhattan Merchandising Incorporated, which is owned by the Kingpin. Murdoch is in disbelief that someone would be bonkers enough to go after the city's premier crime boss, and Pete elaborates how he questioned Kenny about the warehouse, who was too scared to reveal the new muscle in town. Fitzgerald did mention who tried recruiting him, however, a man Matt is defending named Jack Daniel Abbott. Hey, Abbott! Masking back up, Spidey asks his friend to pay the guy a visit, find out who's paying his legal bills, while the web-slinger will do more digging to find out who's either stupid or scary enough to pick a fight with Fisk. He swings off, though Matt asks him to wait, but I guess it wasn't very important since he just stands there, facing outside in his costume without a mask. I know he's got enhanced senses, but he's not going to be able to detect if someone on a roof across the street or someone with a telescope happens to look in his direction.
Just because he's blind doesn't mean he can't feel. Very, very stupid.
In an undisclosed location, Stilt-Man, whose shadow we saw earlier in the comic, is working on his gear, grousing about doing nickel and dime work when he'd gladly kill Fisk himself with the right opportunity. One of the two others with him, Gladiator, reminds his small friend that Fisk is still top dog, though in a much more regal manner, and they need to wait for the right time. After Stilt threatens his life for being called small, a fourth figure approaches, saying they can't take the city if they're fighting each other. Possessing a peculiar vocal tic, he applauds their evil ways, noting the cloaked figure is Copperhead, and refers to them as his children. That can't feel very complimentary. The Mystery Man claims they're all kindred spirits with how civilization has treated them, and they shall be rewarded for what they've endured. For this city is a shimmering prize of insanity, an asylum of untold riches, and soon, very soon, it will belong to the inmates.
Inmates running the asylum, is it? Well, it was at least composed in a unique fashion, so I won't knock you for the cliche. But as far as inmates actually running the asylum, I'm afraid DC Comics kind of beat you to it since 2011.
Matt Murdock meets with his aforementioned client, Abbott, whom he's known on and off for years, noting that if it weren't for a couple of bad breaks, he could have been a law-abiding, successful member of society, even a lawyer. However, in this one case, Matt notes that Jack is innocent. He reminds his client that the terms of his parole forbids him from associating with known criminals, and brings up the rumor Jack has been recruiting for some new organization. The prisoner warns that this alleged group is in it for keeps, and they have eyes everywhere, maybe even having guards on their payroll. While tapping on the table, Abbott continues that even friends can't be trusted, and answering questions could be fatal. Murdoch can detect that he's trying to use subterfuge, send a message without the nearby guards knowing, in particular with the 7 taps. When asked to give up his new boss, Jack says being a snitch isn't his modus operandi, and he's a regular Latter-day Saint like Marie Osmond.
You're working for Nutrisystem! I knew they were up to no good.
Matt begins gathering his things, saying he hasn't got much to work with in order to help, but Jack replies that it depends on how you look at it, pardoning the expression. Matt leaves, stating plainly the man never said a word. The next several pages have the same format. 12 panels that cover 3/4 of a page, and one larger panel at the bottom. Feels a tad crowded, I must say. Anyway, the panels jump between Copperhead, Stilt-Man, and Gladiator infiltrating Wilson Fisk's building, taking some personnel out. We also see a helicopter, and Fisk himself in a meeting, angry about recent losses, reminding those in attendance that he's blind.
Apparently, in Daredevil Volume 2, number 15, Kingpin lost his sight to the character Echo. He probably shouldn't have killed her father and then blamed Daredevil for it, because she found out and then, I say. But hey, crime bosses, what are you gonna do? He does eventually get his sight back, like 31 issues later anyway.
Weird thing, This comic is dated January 2001, while the aforementioned Daredevil issue was dated April 2001. So, did they write Kingpin blind before he was blinded? If so, it is the kind of screw-up that can happen in comics from time to time. As the guard warns Fisk they may have a problem, Gladiator takes out the generator, Copperhead detonates a bomb in the emergency stairs, and Stilt-Man destroys the elevator. This all culminates in an attack helicopter that fires a pair of missiles, while Kingpin is waiting for people to elaborate on what's going on. The issue closes on a splash page of an enormous explosion at the top of the tower. Next, the Sting.
Meaning the cleaning service bill. People died. So we get a pretty exciting start to an intriguing story. Someone wants Kingpin on the slab, they've gathered a small group of villains to carry it out, and their paths are bound to merge with the titular heroes. The art is pretty good, no real complaints there, but I did feel like Jack Abbott's message was almost specially intended for Daredevil, not your average lawyer.
The Alex Ross cover makes it look like these two are passing each other in traffic. Stay in your lane! What lane? You heard me! We begin with 16 panels showing a hospital besieged by journalists, reporting on the explosion that someone tries to pass off as a gas leak, and brushes off the notion of a gunship in the vicinity. When asked what he'd say to those presuming he died in the devastating blast, a bedridden Wilson Fisk replies, "Get used to disappointments."
I know I am. Any chance those guys in the chopper could pay a visit to DC Comics?
Credits get whimsical yet again, using singular verbs for their respective duties. Then it gets the then EIC Joe Quesada, who basks in the glory.
Then sells the glory to the devil and doesn't have to explain it. Because stupid.
A reporter named Joe Watson asks if the attack is linked to Fisk's criminal connections, but in his rather regal manner, Wilson explains that despite the slander he's endured, he has no such ties to organized crime. He's a simple businessman who happens to own a stake in the paper Watson works for. And given the liability his company now faces from the explosion, he's retained the legal services of a firm we don't get the name of yet, as we cut to the ringleader of the attack crushing his TV remote in anger at the news of his enemy's survival. Note the rage spittle.
Ah, good boy, little drooly.
Also, interesting choice to further obscure his face by covering his eyes with 2 panels. We cut to Daredevil acrobating it up across some buildings in the daytime, narrating how naive he used to be, and despite promising, among other things, to end the killings, he feels as if the city wants to kill itself.
Well, you spend a lot of your time in an area called Hell's Kitchen, so of course it's going to feel that way. Try branching out a little. Visit someplace else, like Purgatory's Rec Room. I hear it's so-so.
He meets with Spider-Man, and they use first names while in costume, which is always a smart idea. And Spidey notes that whoever Fisk's rival is, he's far from the spotlight. No one's talking, out of fear of either side of the conflict, saying people are running around like it's the end of the world. Not that we've seen that. Then Dee Dee says the wreckage was cleaned up before any trace evidence of the helicopter attack could be found, and with Fisk's survival, more destruction is surely on the way.
Alright, how exactly does that work? A huge explosion shattered at least all the windows of the one attacked building, to say nothing of what the shockwave did to the surrounding area. How does all that get cleaned up before the police arrive? And wreckage wouldn't be the only evidence. Shrapnel from the missiles, burning scorch marks from the explosion. Yeah, I know Fisk is a resourceful guy, but he'd need a cleanup crew of a few speedsters to take care of this mess before law enforcement got involved.
Daredevil mentions his meeting with Jack Abbott and asks if the clue he gave, 7MO, means anything to his friend. It doesn't, and Spidey changes the subject, asking if Hornhead has ever had the inkling to hock a loogie at people while swinging across the city. Yeah. So Matt tells him to grow up. The man without fear wonders if he's becoming the man without faith in their shared path as crime fighters, mentioning Fisk had the foresight to install 10-foot plexiglass on the upper floors of his building. And it's unfair how someone like him cheats death so often. Spidey then asks what he'll do with all the money, but the lawyer doesn't know what he's talking about.
You'd have known if you had paid any attention to ironic narrative tropes. Or if you were Deadpool.
As Fisk tells some of his underlings to send his regards to the wife of their reporter friend, probably meaning Joe Watson came down with a fatal case of offended crime boss, Matt arrives to say he can't take Fisk's case, as his firm is already representing a connected plaintiff on an unrelated matter. Wilson excuses everyone else so the two of them can drop those very heavy facades. Murdoch swears they'll be ice skating in Satan's backyard before he ever works for Fisk, but the mobster cites his blindness for giving him new perspective, saying they've come to understand each other over time and not just because he knows about Matt's life in red tights. He wants Daredevil to find and scare away the new shark in the water, a possible callback to the first issue's narration, or an opening for a reviewer to make a Jaws reference, which I won't. Anyway, he says refusal will mean the bloodshed will be on the self-professed hero. He casually moves on, saying Gladiator and Stilt-Man took leave of a mental institution, and that their current ally Copperhead must be an imposter as the original was electrocuted years back.
An imposter? Come on, Wilson, you never read any comic books as a kid? Death is a revolving door.
He's certain they're working for someone, given their resources, and Matt's cover's legal rep will allow him to report back to the Fat Man. Murdoch begrudgingly agrees, then asks if 7MO means anything to him. I would say if a man wanted to solve that particular puzzle, it would depend on how he looked at it. Right now, I don't know if Edward Nygma is laughing or crying. Feeling the graphite, Matt is rather incredulous at the idea it could be the owl. But Fisk notes how the sane can be bribed or reasoned with, but lunatics, not so much. Let me point out, this comic was released in early 2001, before 2008 brought us this. Fisk tells his reluctant lawyer to skedaddle, since he got what he needed as usual. I'm seeing a long-held personal dream fulfilled this afternoon. I've always wanted to own a superhero.
And how messed up is it that a murderous crime lord is more respectful to the superhero he owns than some publishers? This is for Cassie Kane!
Outside, Matthew is met by his legal partner, Foggy Nelson, in disbelief about taking Fisk's case. However, Murdoch needs him to do a solid and head to Wisconsin to meet with Wilson's accounting firm, accompanied by Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. Looking a lot less ginger than usual, I must say, as she exits a cab. They've previously met before, Nat tossing a few slim compliments Foggy's way, and Matt assures him he'll figure things out and need only go through the briefcase he's given before the unlikely pair is off.
Hey, you hear the one about the assassin and the lawyer that took the same cab? No, neither did I.
That night, Daredevil works off another clue from Jack Abbott about looking for bad guys in the air when they're under one's feet, meaning he and Spider-Man are sewer-bound. I got a bad feeling about this. Way to contribute, Spidey. Dee Dee narrates that he's also uneasy. There's a lot of sensory information bombarding someone with his powers, and it's basically like having no information at all. He even detects excited heartbeats that turn out to be rats, laughter that's actually water. Only God knows what's making that foul smell.
Oh, come on, Matt. You're in a sewer. You know what that is. Everyone does.
He focuses more and detects some distinct breathing. Just as he warns the guy with spider sense to look out, a blinding flash of light precedes gunfire, from which they take cover. Devil notices the gunmen aren't advancing, meaning their assailants want them to stay put. At the scent of nitroglycerin, he shoves Spidey down, narrowly avoiding the epicenter of an explosion taking up 2 pages. Dee Dee is unconscious as Spider-Man is met by the Owl and his recent trio of allies, ending the issue. When asked what to do with them, the Owl replies, "Eat."
Our DiGiorno pizza has cooled long enough. Oh, and kill the superheroes too, I guess. So, an obscure clue gave way to the revelation that the mastermind was an obscure villain. I really don't know anything about the Owl or any of these other villains, to be perfectly honest, so I don't know why Murdoch was so reluctant to believe that he was behind the attempt on Fisk's life. Tune in next week to see if Spider-Man gets a chance to narrate while his co-star catches some Z's. I'm the Angry Spork, and boy have I got issues. Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with Daredevil's Spider-Man, Unusual Suspects. When we last left our heroes, Matt Murdock had been hired to represent Wilson Fisk to cover any liabilities from the explosion at his building that almost killed him. The Kingpin, knowing Matt Murdock's secret identity, tasks his attorney with finding his would-be assassin and stopping him, and it's revealed that the Owl is indeed the culprit. After sending Foggy Nelson to Wisconsin alongside Black Widow, Dee Dee and Spider-Man search the sewers, and after an explosion knocks the former out cold, it's Spider-Man against the Owl and his goons.
The cover appears representative of how the last issue ended. Daredevil face down in the water while Spidey and the villains are seen in the background. Though it looks awful clear for what's supposed to be sewage. We start off in snowy Montana? They were supposed to be headed to Wisconsin. From New York. How bad a driver are you to take that kind of detour? Anyway, the weather reminds Black Widow of Siberian summers while Foggy Nelson bemoans his lot in life. Sure, he's road tripping with a saucy assassin, but it feels like all he does is the legwork, risking life and limb to save humanity, while his superpowered friend must be having the time of his life. Cut to Daredevil lying in sewer water at the mercy of 4 psychotic villains.
Take it from me, Foggy. When it comes to heavy snowfall, sometimes you just gotta make the best of it.
Unable to wake his cohort, and with Stilt-Man aiming a hairdryer at him, Spider-Man is left with one option. Dramatics. You finally did it! You killed my brother! Why couldn't you have stayed in prison where you belong? Say, how did you get out of prison anyway? And this begins the exposition, largely told by Stilt-Man of how he, Owl, and Gladiator met in the loony bin, and rallied under Featherface as the Gang of Three, as they were eventually allowed to hang out together. They would soon escape, leaving behind them some dead orderlies on pottery wheels, which is odd. The scene almost makes it look as if the wheels themselves were used to kill them, but whatever. They later became known as the Gang of Four after Owl recruited Copperhead. He's a real criminal genius, is Mr. Owl.
But does he know the number of licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? Obviously not, or he'd have ransomed off the answer by now.
Just as Stilt-Man is about to do away with the wall crawler, Daredevil tosses sludge in his face, redirecting his blast upwards.
I really don't know what's weirder, the awkwardness of how Stilt-Man explained their escape, or the fact that he was so praise-heavy of the Owl. I mean, either way, it was just some clunky exposition that I guess the other villains just tolerated because Stilt was the one with the gun, maybe?
Arriving at Waterway Imports, Foggy's complaining about the cold when Natasha offers to show him the art of shared body warmth and vigorously rubbing one's extremities to save off frostbite. And indeed, Foggy's reaction could be summed up in hamna 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 hamna. They draw near to the stately domicile housing Kingpin's accounting firm, and while Foggy takes the main entrance, Widow parts ways for a more stealthy approach. Back to the costumed scuffle, Stilt-Man's weapon left an enormous hole leading to the surface, where Daredevil suggests they take the fight, if Spidey's not too busy cracking wise and punching Gladiator. Stilt-Man takes another shot but misses them entirely. If anyone asks, I'll tell them you hit us, okay? The villains give chase, and Dee Dee wants to take on the Owl while the Webhead handles the other three.
Because that's fair.
However, when it looks like Spidey is so busy with Gladiator that Copperhead is about to get the drop on him, Devil intervenes immediately. So is his vaunted spider sense on the fritz or what? Well, Owl goes straight for the guy in all red, while Spider-Man contends with dorky long legs. Murdoch narrates how beastly his opponent has become when they're beset by a 2-page spread of Wilson Fisk and a small army of goons armed with rifles and rocket launchers. And then we got back to Wisconsin.
Don't worry about how Spidey fared in his fight. He's fine. After all, his opponent was always stilted.
Foggy is stammering his way into stalling for time, while Natasha slinks in and takes out a guard elsewhere in the building. Her fruitless rifling through a desk is interrupted by another guard, whom she knocks out with what looks to be a paperweight, and he falls over, pulling down an axe held by a decorative suit of armor, revealing a secret room full of files, documents, and a computer.
Well, as you Americans say, bongo.
I'm actually less weirded out that Wilson Fisk used contractors from the Scooby-Doo villain school of secret layers, and more perplexed that an accomplished spy messed up basic American lingo.
Meanwhile in New York, Fisk is gloating over his impending victory, saying he doesn't play second fiddle to third-rate crooks. My men will be issuing you the booby prize, of course.
Phrasing.
I will make you the taint of this city, you obese wretch.
Hey, phrasing!
Having done what Kingpin wanted, Daredevil plans on taking Owlsley back to the asylum. But the death of the villains that tried killing him would set such a good example to others, and 2 dead heroes would make some nice trophies. As Owl launches an attack and bullets start a-flying, Kingpin takes his leave, but expecting Daredevil to survive and be in Fisk's office at 9 a.m. sharp on Monday.
He probably expects him to bring donuts, too.
The scuffle becomes a free-for-all, and you'd think the arrival of the police might help some. Except when Spidey tries to warn them, some rookies open fire, and he gets tackled by the Owl before the cops are attacked by Stilt-Man. Despite the chaos before him, Daredevil can't help but feel it's become secondary to something else. He notices Copperhead has removed himself from the fray, watching nearby, and with the little detail that he doesn't have a heartbeat. Hornhead confronts him, surmising that he was the one that recruited Owlsley, not the other way around. Copper says that what's unfolding is his gift to those that brought him back. He removes his helmet, revealing that, as mentioned in the previous issue, he is indeed dead.
Coming back from the dead is nothing new in comics. Coming back while still dead? Yeah, that's significantly less common, I think.
The final issue's cover is perplexing. Daredevil is running along a staircase, upside down, while Peter Parker looks like his costume is painted on and evaporating. We open to a man drunkenly stumbling through an alley, and reading his dialogue as he speaks, you can tell he was a stockbroker that has now fallen on hard times. I mean, just look at what he's speaking into.
I've heard of a bricked phone, but this is ridiculous.
But the man cuts his conversation short, seeing Copperhead energy blast Daredevil off a rooftop. You know, like snakes are wont to do. The walking corpse begins a summoning, getting rather grotesque in describing human innards, as he offers up people as his gift to the beloved, known as Beelzebub, Zamael, Lucifer,
And a million other secret names.
They had to stay secret, because the Devil's business card was getting way too crowded.
After a 2-page spread where a chunk of the city gets warped into a new perdition, we jump to Wisconsin, where Foggy Nelson is underneath their car. For some reason, while Black Widow is bemoaning not finding anything in Kingpin's safes.
Nothing of any use to us. Not a pickle.
It's not a sausage, actually, and as a matter of fact, I think there is something we can use. She asks him to repeat himself. He starts with the food idioms again. She specifies what he said after, and he repeats himself word for word about what they can use.
Firstly, I would normally criticize a second instance of a super spy not being aware of a phrase or colloquial metaphor, but I've never heard that particular phrase before, regardless of what processed food we're talking about. Second, this page is 5 panels and it feels very padded. Half of it is a character repeating himself. Could you not have found some other dialogue to use to keep it somewhat interesting?
The news is reporting on the energy barrier at the docks, one that has the Fantastic Four struggling to pierce it, and their leader Reed Richards to explain it. Inside, Spider-Man is swinging along with Daredevil in tow when they encounter zombies. But they're easily webbed up. Hey, people on The Walking Dead, that's your answer! Build web shooters! Coincidentally, a priest is nearby, dying. Murdoch goes to him, the man of the cloth being able to tell that the man without fear is of the faith, warning him that the devil walks the earth, and when the vigilante faces the damnation ahead, he must remember Romans 12:21. And then he dies. Owl is nearby, but clearly the heroes don't see him, as Spidey makes a joke about the passage involving kangaroos, which ticks Dee Dee off. A man of the cloth died here, Peter. Is that funny to you? Is it?
He uses a hero's real name while there is definitely a supervillain within earshot. So they're the opposite of observant and smart.
Spidey gets mad right back at him, saying he kids around to deal with the insanity he routinely deals with. He interrupts Matt, who seems like he's trying to apologize, going on that the alternative is to mope around about the people he didn't help, and suggests the blind guy lighten up instead of dragging the webhead down. He immediately points to where they should go, the apparent source of the mystical energy, and save any Zen warrior enlightenment for later. And sure enough, Owlsley follows without notice.
I'm more familiar with Spider-Man than I am Daredevil, and I'm a bit of a snarker myself. But I gotta side with the attorney on this one. It's one thing to joke around when a guy in a vulture costume is swearing revenge, or you're dealing with your 5th mugger in a given hour, but a guy just died. Right there! His soul isn't even in line at the pearly gates before making a joke, and of his last words, no less. The phrase too soon would be an understatement.
Murdoch considers that his friend may have had a point as he recalls the passage the father left. His senses detect a rot like he's never known as they approach a church that seems to be the epicenter of the energy entrapping them. Not just any church, but the one where his former girlfriend Karen Page died. As they make their way inside, Spidey quips some more about how he hopes this whole experience is an hallucinogenic after effect of falling into a glue vat or accidentally eating a mushroom growing out of cow pats.
Do you know what a cow pat is? It's feces. Feces from a cow. And the concept of even accidentally eating a mushroom from a patch of dung coming from Spider-Man is terribly worrisome. Did Paul Jenkins get bitten by a rabid Seth MacFarlane?
Also notice how weirdly placed the H in headache is. Weird. Anyway, at the altar, Copperhead has his former associates Stilt-Man and Gladiator suspended by magic, having them experience visions of defeat, humiliation, and torture. At least that's what I gather from the panels of Gladsy about to be struck down by order of Caesar, and Stilt-Man losing his legs to a guillotine. Dee Dee thinks they could be hallucinating, but Copperhead snipes how it could be very real, like stubborn little Catholics would likely believe. Not Copper, though, until he died, blaming Hornhead, and experienced hell firsthand. Spidey is rather ambivalent to all this as he tries to free the incapacitated villains, and gets caught in the energy himself, apparently experiencing the trauma and pain throughout his life. And if you know anything about Spider-Man, you know that's a freaking doozy.
And it seems, once again, Spider-Man is lacking his trademark spider sense. Seriously, what's going on? And don't turn this into a "it's magic, we don't have to explain it" bit. That's not gonna go over well.
Copperdead explains that Satan's got more black hearts than he knows what to do with, so sent him back to fetch some pure souls, and the portal that's been opened can only be closed by an offering of a worthy life in exchange. So Daredevil takes Stilt-Man's gun, looking kinda different than before, and puts it to his temple. Copper is at first startled by this, but then toys with the hero, asking if his suicide to save others will count as a suicide, or if God will abandon him for committing an unforgivable mortal sin. Just as the undead villain reminds him of his lost love, I don't know if Copperhead knew his secret identity before he died, or if that's just another attribution to his return, the gun is smacked out of his hand by...
Who?
Yes, it is. The owl says that his assumed subordinate was inside his mind the whole time, making him blind. Dude, actual blind guy right there! And decides that the offered soul to close the portal will be his. Dee Dee grabs his hand to try and save him, but Leland accepts where he's headed, slashing at the crime fighter's arm to release his own. The owl says he didn't mean to do what he'd done, that though Murdoch tried to help him, he became lost, but was once a kind man.
Think well of me.
The portal is closed. Spidey and the two villains are released, and the pious hero reels as a caption reads the passage that was the priest's final words.
Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. It's really a shocking and solemn moment that's made barely any sense at all. Setting aside how two characters with superhuman sensory perception never were made aware of a supervillain following them, how does Owl sacrificing himself for revenge count as good? Was it revenge? That whole controlling Owl's mind bit came from nowhere, but I guess that's supposed to clear up all the chaos and death he implemented. Remember, before joining up with Copperhead, Owl, Gladiator, and Stilt-Man worked together to escape an asylum where they killed at least 2 people with the intention of killing Fisk and anyone that got in their way.
It must be Monday morning past 9 since Fisk is chiding Murdoch for being late. He mentions that he's been trying to pass off the recent disturbance as part of an elaborate movie his company was producing. I'm sure that was convincing, given that one of the smartest minds in the Marvel Universe was on the news saying he didn't know what the heck was going on, while his team pummeled an energy barrier to no avail. New York is going to hell anyway. Just look at who's representing us in the Senate. By the way, at the time this was published, that was... Wilson intends to leave it to his current legal representative to calm any outrage, like from the mayor, about authorizations and licenses and such. But that's when Murdoch defers to his associate Foggy, entering stage right on cue. In so many words, and with less fumbling than we've seen before, Foggy explains his Dairyland discovery, that contractors Fisk paid in the previous February used lead-based paint with the big guy's full knowledge, a kind of paint that had been banned in New York for over 4 decades. If they were to continue representing the businessman, they'd be duty-bound to report the indiscretion, and people would be less than thrilled at the health risks to which he subjected his employees. And so the legal firm of Murdoch and Nelson are off the hook. But Fisk's secretary will still get lead poisoning. Almost everybody wins. Outside, Foggy is catching his breath, and Mac gives him accolades for how he held himself together. Nelson begins asking if it'd be okay to ask Natasha out, since it seemed they hit it off pretty well on their business trip, and there is a history between her and Matt, but he gives his blessing, though teasing she's not called Black Widow for nothing. Meh. Still makes more sense than some Black Widow pairings. That night, Spidey and Daredevil are high above the city, musing over how unbelievable recent events have been, dead villains, and how one became Satan's gopher. After being complimented for his bravery on this adventure, Spider-Man apologizes for his earlier outburst, as well he should. But Dee Dee tells him it's fine, that they just work differently, and he might just not be one for humor. Spidey swings off, and we see that the man without fear may not be completely humorless after all. And that was Daredevil Spider-Man Unusual Suspects. Overall, it was lukewarm. Putting aside some technical errors like different spellings of Owl's first name and in off-kilter H, the story starts out as a mystery of who's trying to replace Kingpin, then takes a sharp left down Magical Devil Henchman Boulevard. Some stuff gets told in dialogue when it would have been more impactful to at least show some of it in a panel, like Spider-Man's claim that people were acting like the end of the world was nigh, which now I think was really more a tongue-in-cheek reference to the events to come. The dialogue wasn't all bad, but there were moments where it kinda was, whether it was repetitive and felt like filler or clunky for exposition's sake. And then we have those elements that were grossly underdeveloped.
Seems we pretty much have to take the owl at his word that he was being mind-controlled somehow. I feel like there'd be more weight to the story if I was more familiar with these villains or I followed the Daredevil comic. And lest we forget the dying priest, who could probably become the patron saint of convenience given his proximity to the heroes and his dying words that acted as the means to win the day, as if he had some special knowledge or previous experience with magic of which we have no context.
I think the art's good, crazy detailed. That error of saying that Foggy and Widow were in Montana when they were actually in Wisconsin isn't nearly as annoying as how the super senses of the title characters seem to just not work at times with no explanation. Though one thing that bugged me when all was said and done was, this is a miniseries titled after two superheroes, so it's expected that there'd be a level of equality of focus. Have some narration from one of the title characters, some narration from the other. Look at one's day outside the costume life, look at the others. See things from each one's perspective.
But we don't get that balance. It's almost entirely on Daredevil.
Spidey's around to sock some jaws and crack some jokes, though a few of them weren't particularly funny, but it's Matt Murdock who sets the tone of the story, relates to the reader via narration, and the perspective we stick with throughout. Maybe this should have been called Daredevil Foggy Unusual Suspects, since Nelson contributed more to the story than Spidey did. Frankly, how much would really change if Parker was taken out of the picture entirely? I mean, we get less of his antics, but they sometimes bordered on the childish rather than charming.
No offense to the artist, but I remember when Alex Ross covers were almost exclusive for things like big 12-part stories or specialized giant-sized comics, but this felt more like 4 issues of the Daredevil ongoing that just happened to guest star Spider-Man. I'm the Angry Spork, and boy have I got issues.